This is the Miseducation Project with your hosts J.V. Torres and Harry Preston.
Good time, everyone.
We want to invite you to the first trial run of the Miseducation Project.
The Miseducation Project.
So you may not know, the Miseducation of the Negro is a book written by Carter G. Woodson.
No, I'm about to be educated.
No, I mean, we'll say that for a later time, right? But, more recently, it harkens back to an album by Lauryn Hill in 1999, Miseducation of Lauryn Hill.
The Miseducation. Okay, so let's delve into the whole idea of miseducation. I'm really I haven't heard this term before, and I'm really intrigued by it already, right off the bat, that it's miseducation.
Yeah, miseducation.
Miseducation.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me, how are kids being miseducated now?
Well, I mean, it's not so much. Well, there's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there, right?
Since you went right for the throat, I figured I would too.
Well,
So.
you got to get an idea of what the concept we're talking about is as we go into it. Mm-hmm. But again, and I think what we'll do is we'll save that portion, that at least the naming of the project itself, for a later time where we can dive deep into that. But I think what you're alluding to here, what we need to get into, is the overall premise of what we're doing with this cast, which is talking about what's going on in schools and with students in the communities, and then wrapping all that up into something that'd be interesting to listen to or watch.
Everyone, I am J.V. Torres, and this is my co-host, Mr. Harry Preston. We are both educators in the Baltimore City Public School System, and I would like to think of us as provocateurs of sorts.
Provocateur would be a nice way of putting it.
Why are we labeled protagonists, or why are we labeled provocateurs in the education field?
I think that's because from time to time we have a tendency to say what needs to be said, even though not necessarily want to be heard. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. A lot of the things that we talk about a lot of times ends up being, right on point, but not necessarily what you want to hear at the time you're hearing it.
No, I agree. I think you and I are probably not so different when we're at a staff meeting or we're in any kind of town hall where they're talking about what needs to be done in the schools. And we're going to touch on what we think needs to be done in schools. But I know that, just from my experience, I know that when I put my hand up or I get ready to speak during a staff meeting or something like that, I already feel the principal going, "Oh God, here he goes. Here you go. Everybody sit down for this," because he's about to unleash. Does that happen in your staff room with you?
For me, no. Actually, I'm actually not that person in the meetings.
You're not that person.
No, we have a couple of people on our staff that are. Uh-huh. But for me, it's more along the lines of what ridiculous thing is Harry going to say now? Because I think that's the role I play in the meetings. It's the after meetings where I get the opportunity. It was like, okay, he's about to say something serious. And fortunately for me, the schools I've worked in, they've given me a lot of leeway and a lot of support. So I can definitely say that I don't get the groans as much. We definitely have people on our staff who are the ones who are catching those, oh my God, what's she about to say? He's about to say? What's about to happen now? Because there are a lot of people who take it in a different spirit than I do. But again, in the roles I've been in, I had to be a little bit more political and a little more polished about what I can say and can't say, which is why I enjoy the opportunity for us to be able to have this podcast. Because I think a lot of those conversations you and I have offline, and I also get the opportunity to have those conversations with our leadership offline. But in a way that is more supportive and saying, listen, you might want to consider this before you say or do this. And that's been a great thing for me.
Let me ask you a question, Harry. So do you think that the support that educators get or don't get, do you think that is the same as the support that kids get or don't get in the schoolhouse?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
I know that.
Man.
I was just going to say that's a loaded question.
There's a lot of parts and pieces of that, if you can imagine.
Can we even put them in the same island?
I don't think so, because I think there's a lot of factors at play that we're not paying attention to. I also realize that there's some popular schools of thought as to what's getting given to our students and what's being asked of our teachers. And to be clear with that, I don't believe they align all the time. In fact, I believe most of the time the problem that we face is that they're not aligned, and they're misaligned in some cases intentionally.
Are they miseducating too?
Oh, well, of course, that is definitely a miseducation. And here's the thing: the people who are doing the miseducation in this case many times don't realize that they are the people perpetuating the problem. They
are you referring to the adults?
The adults in the building who don't realize that they are creating situations, unintentionally or intentionally, that are taking our kids and their coworkers down the wrong path to getting to where they intend to go. It's kind of like they're being counterproductive because they lack the skill set or the understanding that what they're doing is leading to a miseducation.
Mm. Now, this is something that's very prevalent in the news. You hear it not just in local news here in Baltimore, you hear it all across the country. You hear parents and you hear school people who are stakeholders that discuss very publicly their dismay and their well, put it bluntly, they're angry at the school systems because kids are being, as you eloquently put it, miseducated. What's the recourse here?
Well, there's again a very loaded question, something that we have to work on.
What can teachers?
Okay,
all right. Let me step back. I apologize.
Take a little bite-sized chunk out of that.
Let me step back again. You as a teacher. How long you been a teacher?
This is about my 16th or 16th year, I think.
So you're a well-seasoned teacher by now.
Yeah, like salt and pepper, everything. We got all kinds of seasoning there.
You got Old Bay on you and everything. Okay.
Well, see,
literally Old Bay. Okay. I digress. Okay, so you've probably been on the ropes a few times as an educator. When you find yourself at your lowest point as a teacher, and you're seeing the kids, and you know that these kids are headed down that wrong path. You could see the road up ahead, and it's a bad place. I mean, what do you do? How do you handle that?
The crazy part is that the bad place that we're talking about, the kids being down the road, is in the classroom sometimes, right? You got in the schoolhouse. We have that problem right now. We're talking about down the road issues, and we're dealing with these things right now.
What kind of issues, though? Can you share some of the issues?
Let's take something as simple as just getting to school, right?
Okay, let's get to
school. We
got
kids with different start times, and it makes sense. It was always designed to be an equity solution. We're going to have some kids start at 7 o'clock. We have some kids start at 9 o'clock. We have some kids start. We got high school kids, right? Just roll in whenever. But then we have certain kids that, like, what are we doing about the kids who are taking their little brother or their sibling to school? Mm-hmm. Like they're getting marked late every single day. They're getting, but it's been a fact of life for years, and there was no prep time, right? And we're not talking about just in Baltimore City. I'm hearing about these cases, same thing in Florida, in California, in Wisconsin, Hawaii of all places.
Of all places.
Everybody's trying this equity solution, but nobody thought about the casualties of these new policies without taking the prep time. Like, we want to get all the cars off the road. We want to have kids separated. We want to make sure that there's no COVID transmission on the buses. Great idea in theory, but what was the thought that people put in place thinking, okay, well, the kids who were taking these, their younger siblings oftentimes are lower income kids, the ones we serve, right?
Right.
Parents who are maybe one parent home or both parents, but they're working, and they're working at times that is not on the agrarian school schedule.
Had to throw that in there, didn't you?
Yeah, there's the little jabs we got to get in there when we can.
Got to get it in there. Go ahead.
But again, so we're having to look at more equitable solutions to how kids are able to access the education itself.
Okay, I have to stop you there, Preston, only because I hear the word a lot. I mean, I think most people hear it like a drum beat at this point. Boom, boom, boom. The equity word.
Oh, absolutely.
What is this equity?
I mean, we got to look at the difference of equity versus equality. So equality, everybody's getting the same thing. You and I, we're different sizes, we're different heights, we're different age, but we're going to give you all the exact same. We're getting there. We're getting there.
I'm catching up to you.
But again, we both get the same amount of, let's say, water.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
But I walk up 10 flights of stairs every day, and you get dropped off by your chauffeur to school. No, but again,
we're playing fantasy now.
Well, okay. You never know. in the real world, right?
No, in the real world.
But again, I'm doing 30, 40,000 steps a day. My building is hotter than yours. Whatever the situation is, I'm moving, but we get the same amount of water.
Okay.
We get an equal amount of water.
I got you.
But is it actually fair that I'm in a hotter building, doing more steps, doing more work during the same time frame, and have the same amount of water to be able to sustain myself? And again, that's just a ridiculous explanation, but if you think about it, it's something people can all relate to. How much water you're able to get. Now, I'm a little bigger than you and taller. I move a lot more. I sweat more. So if I'm getting the same amount of water that can sustain you, is that same amount of water able to sustain me throughout the course of the day? So by the end of the day, you're comfortable. Yeah, listen, I got water in excess. Me, at the end of the day, I'm pouring down sweat and I'm absolutely dehydrated.
But see, I think you're, and maybe you didn't mean to, or maybe I've just misunderstood. But the way I'm reading this, to me, and I'm just being devil's advocate here. Okay?
Absolutely.
I'm not trying to be, adversarial about this conversation. But it sounds to me like you're talking capitalism, because if you look at capitalism, it's like, capitalism, we need money to grow the business, and I need money more to do X, Y, Z, and I need to build another factory, which means I need this. I need to keep the wages down in order to afford that. In a way, capitalism is equity.
I mean, I don't know about that equation, but I mean, I do recognize that the necessary need to tie in capitalism and education. After all, we test our kids to death, and who owns the testing companies, and how much do we pay to testing? I mean, it's just a ridiculous situation. So capitalism and education are inextricably tied together.
Now, I agree with you there, and I know that that's become very problematic, and we know as educators that we cannot avoid the elephant in the room, that we have big corporations involved in education that have big time money. These school systems are paying out tons and tons of money to these, testing programs, to these textbooks and these online curriculums. We're talking a lot of money in the billions
absolutely.
Across the country, billions and billions of dollars. And is it about the kids? Because it's. I mean, if you start looking at the trends, and you're looking at test scores or whatever it is, whatever metric you use to kind of gauge where education is, it's been on a downward spiral, man. It's been that way for a couple of decades now, at least. Maybe
Absolutely.
more.
And again, that takes us both back to the questions you were asking earlier about, what's going on between the kids and the adults in these buildings? What's going on with the kids and the adults in these educational systems? And the truth of the matter is that the adults are not finding it a necessary thing to make sure that the kids are being educated. Then the people who are leading those adults will continue to invest in things that make sense for them without the conversation of what's best for the kids. How are the kids? Which is an old African saying. How are the kids? And it's one of those things where you have to understand that if you as an organization invest in your priorities, and you start to find out what the priorities are, if you can look at how school districts and schools themselves invest their dollars. So if you're looking at, are they investing in children? Are they investing in people? Are they investing in systems? And what do those systems do? And if we are not able to sit back and take that apart and undress it, find the sexy parts, then we've got to kind of get
This is not a family-friendly show, apparently.
No, well, a lot more family-friendly than some of the mayors here in
we don't talk about the mayors of College Park.
College Park, yeah,
College Park. We don't want to talk about
that. That is a tough
Ooh.
situation.
Okay, so now I'm trying to stay with you here, and I think our listeners are now, which was right now is just you and me. But anyway, check this out. When you're talking about remember, I want to go back to that capitalism thing part, okay? And here, and try to stay with me, okay? Please. So capitalism is driving education one direction, but then you have the philosophical mantra that exists in education, because I think most of us as teachers want to do what's right for kids. And let's face it, a lot of that is, it should be a meritocracy, but it isn't, because I think we have bleeding hearts, and we want kids to succeed no matter what level they're at, right? So that is a different philosophy. That philosophy is pulling the other direction. Okay. So we have capitalism driving education north, and we have the philosophical part of education pushing south. And when you're pushing two directions, what happens? When you're pushing opposite directions, what happens? Well, if you're pushing opposite directions, there's no movement, and there's a lot of strain in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's the best analogy I can come up with as an educator. That like what's happened when people say, "Well, why is schools so crappy? Why is education so crappy in the public sector?"
In my opinion,
that's how I see it.
No, I think that you're kind of hitting on some of the good things, some very valid points, but I think it's an oversimplification, and I'll explain to you why. When you talk about education, we have to look at the reason for it. I mean, we can all now acquire education on a level that's never been able to be done in human history, right? So, for example, there's one thing I tell my students every day. Now, I teach computer science, engineering, technological stuff, right?
Okay, let's brag. Let's go ahead.
There are two jobs, and I tell them every single day, there are two jobs that are actively trying to eradicate every other job in the world. And it goes against everything you can imagine, and it's computer science and engineering. You talk about all the AI, you talk about all the opportunities, you talk about engineering who are trying to design solutions and resources. The only two jobs that are actively trying to kill every other job is computer science and engineering. They're trying to computer science and engineer their way out of having doctors. Computer science and engineer their way out of having English teachers, math teachers. And you can imagine a system that can change those things. Now,
what are they going to do with us when we don't have jobs?
Well, that's a whole nother, again, being on the other side of that equation, my job is to make sure kids are prepared for that. And not
are they
just
going to
kids,
replace the kids with robots too?
Well, you never know. And the Matrix is actually coming to fruition. But on the other end of that, you cannot build out a solid program or a solid engineering or a solid device without having an understanding of empathy, without having an understanding of history, without having certain contextual knowledge. There's no way for you to be able to design and build things that actually work for people.
Right.
Right?
I agree.
So again, even though they're polar opposites, they are pushing in opposite directions. But even if they're pushing forward, they're still pushing in opposite directions, still together. So you got to look at how that kind of comes together from a different light. I mean, it's counterintuitive, but even though they're working in opposite directions, they're still pushing together. And if you put those things together, if you build a solid program, if you look at the holistic portion of it, then you will start to see the truer picture. Because the thing is, we can only do what we are prepared for. We can't get upset for what we don't earn, for what we didn't work on, we didn't do, right? There's all kinds of versions of that thing. But if we want our kids to have empathy, we've got to teach it. And we can teach it just like a program. If we want our kids to understand other people, we can build it the same way as we build a building, with a strong foundation and supports.
So why is that not happening?
Well, there's no reason for it to happen. Capitalism is what's happening, right?
Okay, so we're back to the big.
We got to have somebody to blame.
Where's my money?
The cloak and dagger, right? It's like we have to have somebody to blame for these situations. But we also, if you look at it, like how we went back to school for the pandemic, we didn't go back to school because they felt that we were all ready to go back.
Destroying the whole generation. Oh no, it had nothing to do with it.
We went back to work because if we weren't at the buildings, if schools weren't running, people couldn't go to work, and the economy couldn't push forward. We all know
I thought it was because the parents were figuring out, hey, if the schools don't want to open, we create our own little education pods, and the schools are like, hey, wait a minute, you do need us, so let's open up the buildings.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of mitigating factors, right?
Call me a cynic, but that's the way I.
But here's what I know. I know that my school had to open up because I was going to be done with my own children. And it was crazy because it's tough teaching certain concepts in a screen. You can't, there's so much, like even as an engineering teacher, it was so difficult for me to teach kids things that they needed to put their hands on. Right? And if you can see that now currently with a lot of skills, you can't teach social skills from a screen, because if I get mad at you, I'll just turn the screen off. You know what? I'm not talking to you today. Click, you're done. We're done. Right. So we have to have a situation where all these things can coexist. I don't believe full technology is the answer. As much as I'm a technologist, I love technology. I love the use of it in classrooms. We don't have paper in my classroom for the very same reason. However, I I do believe there's a place.
It's pretty bad when you don't have paper.
We don't have any. We don't use. But again, we don't use paper, and we find ways to communicate and share information and do different things. And we use a whole lot of electricity, but we don't use paper. We don't use pencil. I don't have to make copies. Those are things I'm no longer spending money on, and now I can redirect it directly to kids. And I think that those kinds of conversations need to be had, but they need to be done structurally, and they need to be planned out in advance. And they need to include, as you said earlier, all the stakeholders, which we don't do right now.
No, we don't, and that's the part I think that's causing a lot of the derailments, because we're not including them in the conversation. In fact, I dare say that a lot of times educators aren't involved in that conversation.
Most times, absolutely, most times.
You have administrators and people who are ambitious, who are have these great ideas, and they're trying to make their mark, and they're trying to move up their ladder, whatever system they're working at the expense of everyone underneath them, and all the way down to the kids. And they're the ones that take the brunt of these crazy ideas that are unproven. And that's really what's the problem.
And here's one thing that I'll tell you is even scarier. We aren't having derailments. We aren't.
What do we have?
Those trains are going down the tracks that were laid. Those trains are going down the tracks that were laid. We're just all on the wrong platform.
Right.
We're the wrong tracks. Okay? So those trains are going down the tracks. They're not being derailed. They're going where those tracks led them. And our problem is that we can't see where they're going because we're on the wrong platform.
That's the problem, though, because I think I'm thinking Nazi Germany, where people were heading on those trains.
Yeah, well, those trains.
Sometimes that's probably a really bad analogy, but that's sometimes how I feel we are.
Yeah, well, that was a physical, human cost, right? But that can still happen with people's minds. That can still happen with our children's futures. Imagine these kids every day being told they're worth nothing. That's a holocaust, if I can say this, a holocaust of mental proportion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're destroying off entire generations by killing off their spirit. You're killing off their livelihoods. Now, again, it's nothing as horrific as the tragic loss of lives during that period of time. But it's a different style of destroying futures.
Right. And you don't have to apologize for it, because this is a very serious conversation. We're trying to make light at times, but this is a very serious topic where we're literally losing generations of young people.
And the crazy part is the damage. See, unlike a person not being there any longer, the damage is that they're still there, but who they are, or worse yet, who they could have been or who they could be.
Right.
That person has been murdered.
That person's been, eliminated from the equation. And the world loses another great mind, another person who could have contributed to society at a very high level. I just can't fathom how many great people we've lost too young, too early, because they were on the wrong tracks.
See? Oh, so now you get there. You see? Not derailed.
On the wrong train. They were on the wrong train, brother. And what do we do? Where do we go from here? Like, Harry, where do we go from here?
Well, that's going to be an interesting conversation.
For next time? Is that
what I'm thinking? What I'm telling everybody who's listening, that's what these series are going to be about. We're going to continue to have these conversations. And again, we're talking about our opinions, and we're going to bring on the folks on who are going to have their opinions as well.
What kind of people do you want to have on here?
Well, again, it's going to be a bunch of people who are stakeholders in education, parents, educators, politicians.
I'd like to get police officers or police captains or somebody.
Yeah, well, those people are available. We definitely have access, and I think that it's a conversation that needs to be had. But here's the thing. One of the things that makes what can happen here great is the diversity of thought. Mm-hmm. And the understanding that, even when we may disagree, we're all going to come out of this thing with some more knowledge than we had before.
Well, that's the point.
Right? And then also maybe change some lives. And that's that. I think that long term, even if we were wrong to begin with or wrong to end with, somewhere in there was something that was said to correct those
let's
those
make
thoughts.
that disclaimer to everyone right now that we don't intend to be right all the time.
Well, that's the thing. Here's the thing. If you can't accept that you are not right all the time, then you'll never be able to accept any kind of growth. And I think that's where we're going with this, right?
I think our kids, our students, are having trouble with this concept.
But why wouldn't they? They're on the wrong tracks.
They're on the wrong train. They got on the wrong train.
Absolutely.
So, Harry, how do you want to close this out? Because, I mean, I think we've covered a lot of ground for a very short amount of time. Certainly there's a lot to bite into and break down and unpack. I think as educators, we have our work cut out for us to talk about a myriad of different topics. Right now, we're just kind of throwing whatever sticks to the wall. But I think our point is that we wanted to get this podcast going, this idea, this concept of miseducation, which, by the way, I just learned that tonight. I didn't know that prior to even going on, turning the on button. I had no idea. So you educated me tonight, sir.
Well, again, I hope that every time that each of us can educate each of us, and that anybody who wants to get involved, definitely keep track of the Miseducation Project, and just take a look at what we're doing. If you want to get involved, by all means, reach out to us. All the contact information will be listed at the end. And again, as we move forward, and as we start to get more traction, we will share all the different avenues and venues in which you can see and hear what we're going to be talking about, what we're going to be doing. And again, when I tell you you're going to enjoy the people we've got lined up, it's going to be amazing. There's so much diversity in ideas and diversity in thought with this project. We got a great cast of people who are supporting the program.
Right.
And I think that as the year progresses, you're going to see and learn, and I'm going to see and learn, and we're going to create a community of people who really care about things, and not just care like bleeding heart care, but care enough to take action and to better themselves. Because again, the only way we can better ourselves is through communication with each other and quiet individual reflection.
Harry, I think we should open this up as we start this new adventure. With inviting other educators to weigh in on this topic or any topics we talk about in the future. In the show notes, when I do put them out there, you'll have all that information there. You can reach out to Harry or myself, or we'll set up a website, right?
We have a website.
We'll have a website. Mm-hmm. We'll have a YouTube channel, or we'll bounce it on my YouTube channel, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just as long as it's available and out there for people.
Absolutely.
The Miseducation Project, everyone. We are very happy that you joined us for our inaugural podcast. That's Harry Preston to my right. I'm Jose Torres, or people call me JV. And until next time, thank you for hanging with us. And
thank you again, and we're looking forward to seeing you in the future.
Peace.
You have been listening to the Miseducation Project with hosts JV Torres and Harry Preston. The views on this program are solely those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of the New Kingdom Radio Theater, the JV Micah Publishing Company, its advertisers or affiliates. Please check the show notes for more information about the show and how to contact the hosts. Opening theme music by Kevin MacLeod. This has been a production of the New Kingdom Radio Theater in Baltimore, Maryland. Copyright 2023. Thank you for listening. Until next time.